Welcome to the first of 3 narrated PowerPoint videos for Laboratory 1 for BBE 4023 Process Control and Instrumentation. The topic of Lab 1 is specification sheets, which are usually abbreviated by saying spec sheets. The material is being presented in 3 sections to keep the individual videos shorter and more convenient. The purpose of the 3 videos is to provide you with background information to prepare you for the laboratory activity you will complete in Laboratory 1 during your normally scheduled lab period. By watching the 3 videos prior to the lab, you'll be able to get started on the lab activity right away. The objective of Laboratory 1 is to introduce you to spec sheets and what they are used for in the instrumentation world. Also, introduce you to the Personal Data Acquisition Model 55 by OI Tech Incorporated. You will have to estimate measurement uncertainties using spec sheet data, and you have to answer questions about the PDAC 55 unit, Magnehelic pressure gauges, and pH electrodes using spec sheets posted on the class website. There is a lab handout that accompanies this presentation. Hopefully you have it with you as you watch this video. When you come to lab this week, you'll be able to access the PDAC 55 user manual and spec sheets for Magnehelic differential pressure gauges and pH electrodes as you answer questions about spec sheets and each of the devices. These materials will be in Section 1 of the course module website under Laboratory 1 Materials and Activities. The purpose of this first video is to introduce you to spec sheets. Spec sheets and user manuals for instrumentation are very valuable because of the information they contain. You are strongly encouraged to obtain specification sheets for all the sensors, instrumentation systems, and other equipment you use for your professional work. You'll want to keep copies of them for reference. Today, many spec sheets are available on the web. Spec sheets usually are very detailed and usually quite boring. Most people do not read them for fun. Most people read spec sheets when they are looking for specific information. When you first look at spec sheets, they may be very confusing. They probably contain unfamiliar terminology, and they have a lot of detailed information which makes them hard to read and understand. Also, depending upon your experience, it may be unclear when you first start looking at spec sheets which specifications are important. So where do you begin? Let's begin by thinking about when we need to look at spec sheets and the reasons we are looking at them. In one case, you need to look at spec sheets when you are investigating or researching equipment in preparation for purchase. In this case, you'll use the information to make a decision or recommendation about which device, make, and model to purchase. A second case is when you have a device and you're checking its capabilities in preparation for using the device. In this case, you're trying to use the device correctly, presumably to collect data or control a process. In both cases, specification sheets are valuable sources of technical information. Salespeople and vendors can also be valuable resources, but specification sheets are the most valuable. When researching sensors, instrumentation systems, process control equipment, and actuators to purchase, it is important to review and compare spec sheet information for the different devices and models available. If you were looking for a data acquisition device like the PDAC, I suggest that you keep asking yourself questions like these shown here. Do I need this characteristic or capability for my project? How many inputs do I need? What kind of inputs? How many of each kind? Do I need digital outputs? If yes, how many? What voltage levels do I need? What sampling rate do I need? Think about this as an iterative process, where you go back to your boss or your project and think about and clarify your needs, and then go back to the spec sheets you're looking at to see what capabilities the equipment has and compare their capabilities to your needs. I had a graduate student several years ago that needed a high-speed data acquisition system. He thought that it wouldn't take very long to find and purchase one. Well, it took him a couple of weeks to investigate different data acquisition systems before he could make a decision. Then it took several more weeks for the device to arrive. Researching and purchasing equipment can take a long time. When looking for sensors and other equipment to purchase, you probably will need to consider a long list of characteristics. Which ones are the most important? It depends on your needs. When shopping for equipment, it is very important to know what you need the equipment to do in quantifiable terms. For example, if you're looking for a flow meter, you need to know what type of flow you are trying to measure. Some meters measure gas flows, some measure liquid flows, some can handle liquids with solids, and some cannot. Another characteristic to consider is whether the material is corrosive. If you are working with a food ingredient or product, the meter needs to be cleanable and meet food grade standards. Temperature, pressure levels, and flow rates are important factors too. So it is important that you understand the process so that you can list all of the characteristics that need to be considered in quantifiable terms. Spec sheets and user manuals are important sources of technical information. You are strongly encouraged to develop the professional practice to get copies of spec sheets and user manuals to have them available as references for any equipment you purchase or use. They are one of the first places to look for technical and operating information. In most cases, spec sheets and user manuals are not easy to read, but they are something to learn how to read as a professional. Another vendor source of information is called application notes. These are written descriptions of how someone has used a sensor or piece of equipment for a particular application or use. Vendors publish these so that other potential customers can see how to use their equipment. They can be very useful when trying to figure out how to use a new piece of equipment or to measure some new process. You are expected to find and read an application note as part of problem set 1. We could go on and talk about more sensor and instrumentation specifications, but it is more important for you to be able to look up the information you need. After you graduate, you will need to find, read, and interpret spec sheet information. To give you a chance to practice working with spec sheets and user manuals, you will have a Laboratory 1 specification sheet assignment that you'll complete in Laboratory 1 and Problem Set 1 assignment that is due later in September. The Laboratory 1 assignment is to be done during the lab period and is due by the end of your assigned lab period. This is the end of the first narrated PowerPoint video for Lab 1 for BBE 4023. The goal was to introduce you to spec sheets. You are encouraged to write down any questions you might have so that you can ask them during lab.